there. Back when I was in my 20s, a friend of mine said something to me that I will never forget, and it has really shaped a lot of what I've thought about things and how I've done them. And she was a pediatrician, and I can't remember whether it was right after she had had her first baby or we were just talking in general about things. I was going through infertility at the time. And I remember her saying about the postnatal time, like those first few weeks after a baby comes home. She said, women do each other a disservice by not sharing how hard this time is, that it isn't this magical, amazing, wonderful butterflies time, that it is really, really hard. And then because we don't share that, women then feel bad. She's like, I can see it in these mothers who come in with their babies, for their pediatric checkups and, just the stress and the guilt and all of that stuff. I think things have gotten better. It seems the advent of social media and memes and, I see a lot more of that honesty, which is great. But back when I was in my 20s, that really wasn't there. It was hard to find your people. And because I was going through infertility, and that feels very lonely as well. I mean, I did find there were boards at the time, and there was a blog scene, very much on Blogger. And I found a little community there, and that helped. But I took that advice or that statement. It wasn't really advice. She was just kind of making an observation. And I sort of applied that to the infertility, where I just started sharing, probably oversharing for people, about what I was going through, so that if anybody else was in the room who was feeling like they were by themselves, they knew that they weren't. And so I would talk about those things. And then I remember later when I was getting divorced, I was in my mid-30s, and I was talking with a friend of mine, and we were generally talking about how poor my nutrition was at the time. I think I was eating a Snickers bar and a banana and a Diet Dr. Pepper that was my breakfast every day for a really long time. And I remember talking to her about that because we had met at an Eastern medicine, holistic health thing. And I was feeling bad about that. She's like, you're going through something really hard. Take a vitamin, you'll figure it out later. And she also said, what you're going through, because she had been divorced, sucks. It's going to suck for a while, but I promise you it will get better. And she was right. And I've always appreciated that candor about the realities of things, because if you're painted this rosy picture and it's not working out for you in this rosy way, you start to think it's you and there's something wrong. And so while I have in several videos talked about how great I have things now where I have the flexibility and I enjoy having my own business, I want to talk a little bit about my first year, because it was hard. There's no sugarcoating it. There were times where I was like, what am I doing? I went all in. I had an idea that I had wanted to start another business, but I had intended to build it on the side until it was big, until it made sense to make a switch, but that just wasn't in the cards. I had severance and savings, which helped, but it was tough. I was bringing in clients. I wasn't making enough money. I didn't have the confidence really to ask for more money, because I was still sort of treating myself like in my head that I didn't belong in a new career doing what I wanted to do, because I hadn't proven myself yet, because I hadn't done it for 20 years like I did this other thing. So I was treating myself like I deserved to have to start at the bottom. And that's a really bad way to start out, because then you do. It's kind of self-fulfilling. So I was bringing in clients and I was working, but not enough. And I took some early successes as signs that this really was going to be kind of easy. And, a little bit of that arrogance, or that growing up the smart girl, where things did seem to come easy, at least as far as certain things. I realized that a lot of that came at the expense of my anxiety to make sure that I was good at things. But so I didn't market as well as I should have. I made a lot of mistakes, and I didn't make a lot of money. We were okay, but because we had a backup. It wasn't because of my, business acumen and brilliance. Getting close to the end of that year, I was like, okay, I know I want to make some changes in the new year. I kind of wanted to refocus my business more on women rather than in the tech, because it was also hard for me to get excited about marketing and something that I didn't really love and want to do. So I was making those steps, and I was giving myself a timeline. Like, if I can't figure this out in the next quarter or so, I mean, luckily by this time, my husband, who had been staying home as the breadwinner, had gotten a full-time job, which was helping, but he wasn't making what I had been making when he was staying at home. So, so there was this stress, and I was looking ahead to like, oh, I'm probably going to need to get something else. But I made some plans. I worked with some coaches to try to figure out how I wanted to shape my next year in business, which happened to be 2020. So I went into 2020. I went through a coaching group, and I had a new plan, and I was getting ready to launch it, and then the pandemic. And all of a sudden, my son was home all the time. My husband was home working from home. I was still trying to build my business. I was so stressed out, as was everybody. But in hindsight, it worked out well for me, because I had at least built enough to be sustainable. Like, I had clients who knew me. I had some good steady clients. I had made good relationships. I'd made connections. So I had spent that year that was really hard, but I was building things. It didn't feel like it, but in retrospect, I can see that that's what was happening. And I shifted some things around because I was nervous about starting something, like going in an entirely new direction in the, unprecedented times we were facing. So I kept doing some tech writing, but my business kept growing. And I am grateful for that, because I think about what I was doing before I started my own business, and I worked in commercial real estate, and all of a sudden, and I worked in the development part of commercial real estate, like the building of the buildings. And all of a sudden there's no market for commercial real estate. Nobody's going into the buildings that they're already renting. I don't know that I would have even had a job coming into the pandemic. And here I had already built the beginnings of my business. So, and then I was able to use that flexibility, because I know I wouldn't have had that flexibility had I been in the old, very conservative, commercial real estate thing, because I'm sure it would have been even more stressful, as everybody is worried that they're going to lose their job. And it just would have been a horrible, stressful environment, I think. And knowing them, they probably would have wanted us to come in regardless of what everybody was saying. So at any rate, I was able to use what I had built and the way that I had built it to be flexible, and I just kept growing. So, and it wasn't a picture perfect year by any means, but it's really hard at this point to tease out what of that was pandemic, what of that was my cancer diagnosis, what of that was the murder hornets, and what of that was like not knowing about childcare and the whole, just the chaos of the world, and, riots, and just, feeling like, the horsemen were going to start traveling down the street at any moment. So, that's kind of a hard year to tease out. But then by 2021, I was still going strong. I still, like, every year kept growing, and I kept working. And so what I want to say is that while starting your own business is hard, especially jumping in and just starting is hard, it is not insurmountable. And it is probably not that much harder than dragging yourself to a job you hate every day, if that is indeed where you're at. So that's just what I want to say. In all candor, I am a huge advocate of women building the life that the livelihood that fits their lives, whether that is starting their own business, starting multiple businesses. I kind of work in a couple of different areas because that's what I like to do. And, whose rule was it that I had to do just one thing? So I'm a huge advocate of that, but I am also putting it out there that it's not for everybody. And it's not, even though it's wonderful, it's not simple and easy all of the time. And sometimes it's really, really hard, especially at the beginning. And if you're not aware of that, I would be doing a disservice to anyone who's thinking about it, because if you think it's easy and you get into it and you're struggling, you're going to feel like it's your fault, and somehow that it's something that you did that made this hard and unpleasant, and maybe that this isn't right for you. And I just wanted to let you know that if you're in the middle of that or thinking about that, it'll be hard. Parts of it'll be really hard. You're going to wonder why you're doing this and if you should be doing it, but it's not insurmountable, and it does get better. That's all for today. I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I will see you soon.